This is my presentation for Fundamentals of Theater on Greek and Roman theater. It's the beginning of our kind of Western music theater era. So before the Greeks, long ago, we know that the Eastern countries, China, India, Japan, all those had the same sort of style of theater, but Greek was the first ones to really write anything down and really the only one records that we have. But in China, you had the kabuki theater, you had all these puppet theaters and stuff like that. But like I said, no written records, all Chinese were just oral tradition, stuff like that. But the Greeks were the first written theater. And then the common areas, they had dances, juggling, and acts. And there were 50 Greek comedy playwrights, but there's only one that's still with us, and that is Aristophanes. 11 out of 40 texts are all that we have from him. Only 11 survived. Then he just really focused on defined gender roles in society, satire, and then there was no censorship or political interference in that time. It was just do what you want. The playwrights had free reign, and it was really the golden age of Greek theater as we think of it. There was always an opening night party, and really the theater was a celebration of the Greek god Dionysius, and at the festival of Dionysius is where most of the theaters were performed, and it was a 2 to 3 day festival and of just, bacchanalian propensity, just drinking, partying, and this theater was the center point. And then there was a contest at the very end and a prize given off, and Aristophanes won many of these prizes, which is why we still have most of his works. There was always a chorus and ensemble, and towards the earlier days in the comedy theater, they're what we really know as the narrators, or they're what the main characters bounced off of, and we don't know about the music or the stage directions or the choreo. As far as we know, there wasn't any to be spoken of. They're all just the actors. Each play was a little bit different in how the actors interpreted the plays and what they wanted to do on any given night. So there were 7 sections of the Greek Old Comedy. The first section was the prologue, or the curtain speech. Then you had the intro of the chorus, which was a song and a dance. Then a skirmish of the 2 lead actors. So it's a physical comedy. It was usually between the antagonist and protagonist, just kind of setting up their roles and seeing what roles they would play later on the show. Then the chorus addresses the audience directly. Then there's a debate, and it determines the outcome of the play. And there's episodes with the minor characters, songs, and then the transition for the finale, and the departure of the actor, which is the resolution. And that was how the common playwrights went for centuries and centuries in Greeks, and they actually have, that's similar to vaudeville, and vaudeville took a lot of inspiration off of them. There was no logical connections between the acts. Their entertainment was song, dances, and monologues. Lots of dick jokes was kind of the main thing in the Greek theater. They had these huge masks, and the masks were just a dramatization of the actors and what the characters are, because there weren't any microphones or cameras that were focused on. You had this big massive amphitheater, and so you had to be able to see the masks and what primary expressions each character had. And so there's actually cork that was in the masks that allowed the actors to project more. Another one of my classes, we've studied Greek acting styles, and it's very different. You have to be able to project and orate in a sense that you could still bring deep emotion into it. It's really fun, really interesting, a really fun study just how different the Greek old comedy playwrights are. There was Famous Girl, Lysistrata. It was a feminine play, and there was no sex dominating one or another, mainly because all the actors were male, but even then, there was everyone was on equal footing, sort of in the Greeks. That showed us up later in Roman theater, which we'll talk about a little bit later. But going to be so Aristophanes, he tried to translate humor by tying it into political statements. He had gender, he had statements on war, statements on the politicians, but he failed. This was kind of towards the tail end of the golden age of the early Greek comedies. And as you see, during the Peloponnese War and after is kind of the end of what we think of as Greek comedy, because no one really cared about philosophical meanings, they only cared about the comedy part. So Aristophanes kind of failed toward the end. Then the Peloponnese War came along, and Athens was the main drive of the Greek comics, and Sparta won the Peloponnesian Wars. And after that, the plays just fell out of favor, especially satire and comedy. There's a lot more censorship, more romance plays, and then it was 24 centuries later before Aristophanes-esque performances returned. And so it's really, before I said, there was lots of freedom, all these dick jokes, all these love, war, gender, but the Spartans came in, they're very strict, more warlike. They didn't even care about comedy, they really cared about plays. You can't really call them plays or comics. But the new comedies, as we think, in the Spartan era of Greeks, just think of Menander's Grouch as the primary example of all of those. They're flat, cookie-cutter characters, one-dimensional. There's female courtesans, but everything was very basic. There's always a cunning slave, there's parasitic relations, there's dishonest matchmakers, swaggering soldiers, looks, and then there's music and dance, but it was very disconnected from the plot, and the music was really just for the scene changes. One of the probably a modern example of this was, Hello Dolly. You have that matchmaker, the characters aren't that developed, there's always that cunning slave or cunning underclass person, as well as something funny happened on the way to the forum. That's kind of that's by Stephen Sondheim. That was another example, as well as Menander's Grouch, of these kind of new comedies. And then we get to Roman theater. This Roman theater, as Stephen Sondheim put it, bring on the lovers, liars, and crowns. It's kind of a new golden age, and it's just so the Romans were barbarians conquering the world. Their empire was massive, and they were less into theater, more into variety shows. So kind of vaudeville, not really connection between acts. But once they got to Greeks, as the famous expression goes, Rome conquered the world, but the Greeks conquered Rome. They kind of stole a bunch of their ideas and improved upon them as they could with just their technology and their architecture. But by 240 BC, you had Andronicus and Plautus were the two main playwrights around that time. They adopted Greek comedy into Latin. They were the first Roman works. Seneca the Younger was an example of a tragedy. It faces the world, play, and songs and dance. Plautus, he used music, the first ones to kind of interweave music into the shows instead of just being a filler space as for scene change or what the chorus does or not. There were some actresses, but not a lot. Most of the actors were still men. There were no characters. No characters. There were just dancers and singers, is what the women did. Then all the Roman actors were actually slaves. That's a flip onto the Greek, because only men were allowed in the Greek theater. Women were not allowed, and it was considered a kind of a noble status of the Athenians. You get done talking out of debating, and then you go to the theater, and no women, no even children weren't allowed in. And it was just kind of this very isolated thing, whereas slaves in Rome, they're the only ones, no Roman citizen is allowed to act. And they just kind of saw it as a lower class thing to act, but even the upper class, they still went to the plays, so it didn't really make that much of a difference. But the Romans, what they did bring were lots of technological advancements. They built these huge theaters. The Roman Colosseum is an example, one of these theaters. The Romans gave us a front curtain. They gave us air conditioning. The Romans invented tap shoes. There's more of an orchestra. Like I said, the Romans were the first to really weave music into the plot, into the show. They had reserved seatings, and they had claps, which were just plants for applause. As you see in Shrek, you can hold that guy holding up the sign for applause. It's basically the Romans brought us that idea. They also brought about the first lighting effects. And then there were more Rome wasn't really about the art form of theater, but more about the spectacle of theater. There was the lip syncing, and then more just, they played with, they more focused on their idea of theater was these gladiatorial arenas. They did have some shows, and some shows are still survive with us today. But as they had these huge naval battles, huge lion battles, and they used all these same technological advancements for both kind of areas. But as there were only all three universal themes in both Greek and Roman theater, and that's falling in love, going home, and finding a family and tribe. And that's Greek and Roman theater. It's kind of a very overview. Thank you.